Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and welcome to my shop. We're working on the next step in this side table project, and I have it loosely put together here. Last time we worked on the front stretchers, we've done the side stretchers, the back stretchers, and we have a few more things that we need to do on this. So today we're actually working on the mortise and tenon joinery on the legs and stretchers, as well as this interesting front stretcher that has the slot for the drawer. The top has a sliding dovetail into the tops of the legs, and then the bottom one is mortised into both of the legs, and so we're going to be going into the connections in that, as well as all of the mortise and tenons into the legs. So this should be a fun project all the way through. If you'd like to see the plans, if this video has been out for a while, they'll be on my website. If it's recently put out, then you're going to have to wait until I am done with the project for the plans to come out. So sorry about that. But we're going to get those here eventually. So let's dive into this project and take a look at the joinery. So now we come to the legs, and I want to figure out, before I do anything else, which leg goes where. And so I'm going to come on each of these and I'm going to put a label marker down about 8 inches, because the one end is going to be the top. At this point I will actually pick out which end I want to be the top. I'm going to be cutting off about 6 inches from each of these, so if there is a bad end I want that to be on there. This one has a little knot at the end, which I kind of like, but I don't know, maybe I do, maybe I don't. So I'm going to come in about 8 inches down, and what I like to do is put the sticker on the front or back. And what I like to do is put the sticker on the front of every leg. So this will become the front of one leg, and then I'm going to go through these and pick out which one do I want to be the front and or back of any particular leg. So I'm going to then label them front left, front right. This one is front right. This one is front left. And these are back right and back left. And that way I know which leg goes where, and I also know that the tape is then facing towards the front. So in this case I'll have the front right and front left. I know that this stretcher will then connect into the tops of these, so I can lay that out and mark out and cut into there. So now we have these all labeled out. We can start in on the joinery on the tops of each one. Now, for the joinery of these, they will end up with 5 inches on the top that will have all of the joinery that these then connect into. And then I'm going to eventually cut them off to length and then taper out the ends. I'm not going to taper them until after I cut all the joinery, and then I can lay these on here and find out precisely how far these come down, and then come down just a hair more and start my taper from that point on. So that's why I'm not tapering these first things off. I know a lot of people like to immediately taper these, but I'd rather cut the joinery, well, it's all one piece. That way it sits nicely on the bench. I can lock it down and cut my joinery fairly easily. So in the past, we set up the mortising gauge that has the 2 pins that set in the width of the tenon. And I want to keep that width the exact same, and that width is actually determined by the width of my chisel. So I want to put those 2 points apart, the exact width of my chisel. So I have this set up for marking off the tenon, but now I want to set it up for working on the leg. So in order to adjust this, I'm going to clamp down here with my finger so that these two don't slide apart, but I can still move the fence around. And I'm going to eyeball, I want it to be, I think that looks to be about center. So I'm going to slide this up, and then I'm going to tighten down this nut. Probably not the best way, but I'm trying to get it on camera. Once I get that tightened down and locked in place, I'm going to push those 2 pins into the wood and see how well they line up. In order to do that, I then turn this around and I see if those pins then line up with the 2 holes. And in this case, I got lucky. Those 2 holes line up precisely with the 2 pins that way as they do with that way. And now I know that those 2 pins are centered in this board, and they are the same width apart as my mortising chisel. So now what I can do is I can mark on this and lay out where this tenon will then fit into this board. Because I know those pins are the same width apart as this tenon, so when I make those marks on this board, they will end up being the same width apart as the tenon, as the mortising chisel, as the pins on that. Now this is the back right stretcher, the BR on there, and this is the face leading towards the front. So what I want to do is, this is the back stretcher, and this then is going to go into here like that. Now I always want to be referencing the outside surfaces. That's the one I'm deciding on. I'm going to be referencing the outside face and the outside face of this, of the leg here. I don't want to reference the inside face of either of them. So what I want to do is lay out where this stretcher will connect. So I'm going to come in here referencing on the outside face, which is over on this side. And I'm just going to put in a couple temporary light marks. I'm not going to put anything massive in here because I don't know exactly how long I want those marks to be. I just want to know around where they are at. The next thing I want to do is I want to basically line these up as these two would slide together into that, and then roll the leg over, and I'm going to line up the top of the leg with the top of the stretcher, grab my marking knife, and I'm going to put a little bit of mark right here, and a little bit of mark right here. And what those will do is tell me where the top and bottom of this leg are. I can grab my square, put it right up against that, and I can put a small mark. Now I know precisely where the top of this tenon meets this board, and then I can come down here, I can put this into that small mark that I made earlier. I can line this up on here, and then I can bring my mark over here. And this is the precise bottom of the tenon. And you notice I'm going all the way to the bottom of this 1/4 inch section, not just here at the step. And then that lets me know I can mark from that point up to that point. Let me just go ahead and do that. This is always easier to do when there isn't a camera around that you have to get out of the way of. So there, now I have marks from this point up to this point. The only other thing I need is that halfway point where the step is. So I'm going to put this back in place. I'm just going to drive this in, and then I can set my square on there and make that mark as well. So now I have my tenon marks. This is only going to go down a 1/4 inch. This is going to go all the way through, and it's going to go from this point to this point and that width. The next thing I need to do is carry this mark and this mark all the way around to the opposite side. So what I'm going to do for that is I want to keep in mind this is the inside of the leg and this is the inside of the leg. So if I make any marks or messes on these, it's okay, they're going to be in the inside of the case. I don't need to worry about as much of that. So I can put this on here, put my knife into that mark line that I just made, slide the square up against it, and what I'm going to do is just put a little nick on this corner. And in this corner, I'm actually going to put a little heavier nick because it's on the inside of the case. I don't have to worry about it. I'm going to slide up here, do the exact same thing here. And then I want to carry those marks around to the front. I do that by putting my knife back into that nick. I'm going to make a little nick here, back into this nick, carry that around to a little nick here, and then I can bring it around on the front. I'll put my knife into that little nick mark, and I'll put a mark here. I'll go into that little nick mark. You probably can't see them on the camera because I can just barely see them here. I'm only putting tiny little nick marks because now this will be the front edge of the leg. This will be the edge that everyone gets to see. So any little nick there isn't going to be a problem because eventually I'm going to chamfer this leg down just a hair, and that will get rid of any nicks that are in there. Now that I have that top and bottom mark of the leg, now I always want to remember I'm referencing the outside face and the outside face. So in this case, I want to be referencing the outside face. And I'm going to come in here, just like I did before, and slide those up. And I don't want those marks to go beyond the start and stop mark that I created earlier. And I'm going to come back in and make these just a little bit heavier now, because these are the stop and start marks. These are the start and stop marks of this mortise. So there we have our mortise. We can cut from this side straight in, and it will intersect with this side straight in. And this side, I just need to cut down at least the depth of this step in the tenon. So I don't care what this is, I'll just make a mark however far down that needs to go. So let's start chopping that out. Okay, so now I have the leg set up here, and what you notice is I have the leg of my bench right here. I like to do all my chopping really close to the leg. That's where I get the most contact. The force goes immediately down to the leg into the concrete. Though there isn't going to be a huge amount of difference out here in the middle, especially with how stout this is. It's just one of those weird things that I like to do. I'm going to be using my mortising chisel. It really isn't a problem if you use a regular chisel. A mortising chisel just makes it a lot easier for leveraging. It's a thicker beast and it works fairly well into there. What I want to do is I want to start away from that line. So here's my beginning line. This is just where the stepped tenon is at. And I want to move it away from that 1/8 inch or so, and I'm just going to hit it a light tap. Just like that. Next thing I want to do is move about 1/8 inch farther down the line, come back in, light tap. And then I'm going to move a little bit farther down the line, about an 1/8 inch line. Light tap. And each of these, it's going down a little deeper and a little deeper, and what I can do is I can leverage out those chips. And in this case, because I'm just going down to this step, I only have to go down a little ways. And I think I'm already at depth there. Let me just see. So I can test it by bringing the tenon over. Yeah, I'm well past the depth I need to be. So now at this point, I'm just going to be, rather than going deeper, I'm just going to keep tapping it at this point. I don't need to go any deeper. I don't need it to be any, I don't want it to be any shallower. I'm just eyeballing that I'm running in vertical. And I'll continue chopping down this way until I get back to this midway point. So now I've chopped all the way back to this line. What I want to do is come into the slightly smaller chisel and clean all that out. And then test my depth at the shallowest point. Just stick my thumb in there and test it, and yeah, I'm plenty deep. And I don't mind this being deeper than it needs to be, as long as it's down deep enough for that tenon to slide in. Then I'm going to turn the chisel around and work my way back towards that stop line. I'm just going to stay away from it as long as I can. And about a tiny hair away from it. Now I'm going to go right into that line. Keep the chisel vertical and chop, chop. Just like that. Come in, clean out the waste. And there we go. That is the area that just needs to be down to depth. Now we need to cut the through tenon here. This is going to be pretty much the exact same maneuver, except for we can keep pounding and keep pounding and keep pounding all the way down till we reach China. One of the things you're going to develop over time is the verticality of the chisel. It's very easy to see it in reference from where you're standing, and that's why sometimes you want the mortise running away from you so that you can see if you're leaning one way or the other. But eventually you're going to feel what is vertical, and your hand's going to know where it needs to be, and it's a very easy thing to eyeball eventually. So I don't worry about that as much. And also, if these two are slightly out of plane, and if they bend towards each other, they're going to hit each other eventually. As long as the opening here is exactly where it needs to be, and the opening on the other side is exactly where it needs to be, you'll be able to trim those out so that the two of them meet eventually. There might be a little gap in the middle, but that's really not going to change anything. This is a through tenon. The only thing that really matters is where it touches on the outside. So I'm going to keep chopping all the way back to here, and then I'll come back and talk to you once I get that chopped out. Chop, chop. So around this point is where I like to test the tenon, and oh, happiness! It's not normally that lucky. That is precisely the feel you want. It needs to have some resistance, but still be able to push in there with just hand power. And hey, I'll take it. They don't always go that way. Usually I like to modify the tenon. If anything, I like to make the tenon a little bit fatter, and I'll come into the plane and just smooth it out. And I'll probably show you that a little bit later once I have one that doesn't actually fit, but this one fits nicely. So now that we know it fits, we can keep chopping in. I want to start, and so I've been following along, and at this point I want to bring the chisel back and chop in at this point. I just want to go down about halfway through. And the big mortising chisel like this, it goes really quickly. A lot of your force is transferred. At this point I'm back to this line, so I'm going to turn the chisel around so I have my straight edge here. I'm still not going to put it quite in that line yet. I'm just going to back it off. Chop that out, and now I think I can put it in that line. Now I'm going to come out just a hair away from the line still. And now let's put it in that line. like that. Keep the chisel vertical, chop back in, and away we go. I'm going to clean out this junk, and I'm down at least halfway all the way across that section. So now we can turn it over and chop the rest of the way through from the other side. Now here's a quick pro tip. I just loosened this up and I want to flip this over, but one problem I'm going to have is there are all these chips here. If I flip this over and I set it on those chips and I clamp it back down, I'm going to be driving these chips into the wood. So I'm going to grab my brush and I'm going to clean them out before setting this back down. Otherwise, you're going to have dented wood. And nobody likes dented wood. So now we're on the other side. We're going to just rinse and repeat. Little ways away from the line. Tap, tap. And I'm going to work my way back across here, and at some point, probably somewhere around here, I'm going to break through. And at that point, it's just opening up the hole. So I'll go until I'll get to that point, and then I'll show you what I got. Okay, there I just broke through, and you can hear the difference on the chops. Everything just becomes softer. It just slides right on through. And so now I'm going to take a little bit larger bites, and each one I'm just going to go all the way through. And I'm going to go until I get close to this end, and I'll catch back up with you. Okay, so now I'm getting really close to that line. I'm going to turn the chisel around. Still going to stay away from the line, but keep it vertical until I break through. And now I just got to wiggle out that little bit right into the line. Keep it vertical, really nice and clean. Slide through. Let's see how our connection actually works. Yeah, I can take that. It's a pretty smooth connection from one side to the other. So now we need to clean out the chips, come back to this side, and do the exact same thing from the other side over. So we've cleaned out those chips. I'm going to do the same thing, staying away from the line as long as possible, until we have to get right up to it. And then we can do that final pound all the way through and see how we connect up. Okay, now the moment of truce. Now the moment of truth. We've chopped all the way through. I'm going to clean out all that junk inside and see how it looks. Is there anything that I need to clean out? Is there anything that is uneven? Is there anything that's not matching up? And most of it stands out fairly easily. Just come into the bench chisel and clean out some of these little burrs and things that are sticking out inside. Should be ready to go. Now at this point, theoretically, this should fit in perfectly and have a really nice tight fit and be all ready to go. The reality is it's not going to do that. So we have to work at it and then clean things up and see how they come. And so here we can see how's it going to fit. And we can see where is it tight, where is it loose. And at this point, I am tight in this mouth a little bit. The point at which this tenon joins in it's squeezing it right here, right off the bat. So what I want to do is open that up. So it looks like this edge here, these 2 points when they connected weren't perfectly straight. They were kind of tipped in a little ways. So I want to remove that point, and I can do that fairly easily just by running this down and smoothing it out a little bit. So now after wiggling with it for a little bit, we can actually get it to slide down in fairly nicely. Turn this over. Get a really nice fit. Tiny little bit of a gap up there, but not bad. And a nice, fairly tight edge right there. Now there's a little bit of a hairline edge poking through there, and that will basically disappear once I put, well, it won't basically, it'll completely disappear once I put a drawbore pin through there. That'll suck this up and hold it really nice and tight. So there's one done, and it's basically going to be the exact same thing on all the other points where this connects. So you just need to think through it and go at it. Now the next one though is a side piece, and so this one's going to come in here. So this one, it goes through on the bottom and only goes down a little ways here. And I'm going to show you a few of the errors that might happen once this goes into it. But basically it's going to be cut the same way, and it's going to be marked out the exact same way. So I'm going to go and mark out this leg, how this needs to fit in, chop it out, and when I get to the points where it has a few little differences, I'll bring you back in and show those to you. Another tip that I'll bring in at this point, every time I finish a mortise and tenon joint, what I'm actually going to do is take a little bit of tape and just put it on the tenon itself. This lets me know that tenon is done, so when then I'm trying to figure out, okay, what's the next tenon? Is it this one or that one? I know it's not this one. I know that joint is already done, so I don't need to cut that tenon. And I fit every single mortise for each individual tenon. I don't make all the mortises machined because there's slight differences. I've done this by hand. There's ever so slight differences and variations in thickness and sizes, so I want to make this specific tenon, this specific mortise, match this specific tenon. And this way I know that one's done, I don't have to mess with it again. Okay, so now I have this area chopped out, and this will be the 1/4 inch section. It's only a 1/4 inch deep. And I want it to be a little bit deeper than this tenon piece is, but I don't want it to be so deep that it runs into this open mortise here. So I don't want to be chopping out into that because I want to leave as much material there as possible. That just makes it a little bit stronger, especially since I'm going to be drilling a through bore here in the future, which we'll cover that at a later date. The one thing I want to be careful about is this intersection point. Basically, you're going to have a mortise going through like this and a mortise going through like this, and they'll actually touch. So that those two tenons, as they go through, slide past each other. So you just want to be careful when you're actually getting this intersection point, that you take your time and be careful that you're not, moving too far one way or the other. This then becomes kind of the weak point of the whole joint right there. So just slow down and work at it a little bit cautiously. What I like to do is work away from that and then take out the majority of this, and then actually hit that intersection point when I come at it from the other side and flip this board over. So I'm just going to keep chopping this, and I'll show you what it looks like once I get both of these chopped out. So earlier I told you it was incredible that the tenon fit in their first try, and this one I brought over here, and yeah, sure enough, that one's just too fat. And I like to shave down the tenon, and most of this I'll actually test and see, is it fat here? Is it fat there? Is it fat there? And yes, this thing's pretty fat all the way around. So I want to actually clean up this tenon, shave it down just a hair so that it squeezes in there. I want to show you what I do for that. So first thing I'm going to do is put the hold fast back down. And there's a couple ways of making this happen. Number one, I can come in with a shoulder plane, and I can just shave off little bits until I get a really nice, clean, thin space. And this is probably the quickest way, and one of the best uses of a shoulder plane. But if you don't have a shoulder plane, there's other things you can do. Another way that I used to use for a long time is just come in here with a bench chisel and pare back a little bit up here close to the shoulder. Just take a shaving off all the way around. And then you can come in with a regular old bench plane, because you don't have to worry about getting tight up close to the side there. You can then shave it down this way. And sometimes I still even prefer doing it this way, just because I like using a bench plane. I don't know, I trust it a little bit more. So let's see how this works. Just a few shavings off. Connect it in there. And we're still a little bit tight. So I'm going to do that a couple more times and show you what it ends up doing. I like to sneak up on it. I don't like to make it really nice and tight. And I can tell here I'm sliding in about 1/4 inch or so, but it's just pinching in there. So I know that it's thin enough here on the edge, but it needs to be a little bit thinner here in the middle. So I'll do that a couple more times and then show you how it fits. So after shaving it one more time, then it slides in rather nice like, and then we have our nice fit. So there we have number 2. So we can bring this one over. Got to take that tape off of it. And you can kind of see how this then comes together, and these tenons slide past each other and fit down into the joint. And there you can see how this will come together. Now this tenon is long, that's fine, we're going to be shaving it off in the future. This one is just a hair long, it's sticking out about the right amount, it's about 1/4 inch out, and eventually we're going to come through and pillow that in before finishing it. Well, there's a little bit of a gap on there, but once I put the drawbore pin through here and a drawbore pin through here, that'll suck these up really nice and tight like. So there you have it for today. Now the stretchers are connected into the legs, and we have a functioning leg joint on 6 connections here for the sides and back stretcher. Now originally I wanted to get on to doing the front stretcher as well, but I ran out of time in this video. It would have ended up being around an hour long in order to get this in. So next video will be about connecting the front stretcher, these top and bottom joints here. I will soon be having plans coming out for this. If this video has been out for a while, the plans may already be available, so check the link down below. If not, sorry, you have to wait until I get some more done on this. I'm detailing out some of the plans with how I'm building this as I'm going along. So I do want to say thank you to the patrons on Patreon, because you guys are really one of the big reasons why I'm doing these longer format, higher detail. Hearing what you have been saying and your encouragement and the more reliability on Patreon is making this a reality. So if you'd like to help out with Patreon or find out more about that, you can do so right down there. Also, if you'd like to subscribe and see some behind the scenes footage, you can do that as well. That's about it for today. And until next time, have a wonderful day.